welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. My name is Scott Daly, and I am your host, and I'm joined as always by my co-host. You know him. If he wasn't my co-host, I'd kill him. Matt Freeman. How's it going, Matt?
Hey, man. You're just joking about that, right?
Yeah. Joking. Sure.
My man.
This week, our series, Deconstructing the Films of Ridley Scott, continues with the director's 17th film. We're talking all about 2007's American Gangster. I have so much to say about this movie, Matt. I can't wait for this conversation. This is one that really, really surprised me.
Yeah. I think we share the same sentiments where we kind of remembered this movie as being boring and maybe from the doldrums of Ridley's career. And then we both watched it and we were like, what the hell was wrong with us?
Yeah. So we're going to be talking all about American Gangster, and then it's going to be a short episode this week, I think, because after that we're just going to announce the results of our Canon episode last week on the movie Parasite, and then I thought we would just briefly see how each other feels about the Super Mario Brothers trailer that dropped this week. Worth talking about, I think.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, Matt, let's get into American Gangster.
The man I worked for had one of the biggest companies in New York City. He didn't own his own company. White man owned it, so they owned him. Nobody owns me, though. The most important thing in business is honesty.
Bribery, extortion,
Integrity, hard work,
murder, racketeering.
family. Never forgetting where we came from.
Who is this guy?
So you are what you are in this world. That's either one or two things. Either you're somebody, or you ain't nobody.
What is this movie all about?
An outcast New York City cop is charged with bringing down Harlem drug lord Frank Lucas, whose real life inspired this partly biographical film.
This movie was written by Steven Zaillian, who we also saw on Ridley Scott's Hannibal a few months ago. It was directed, of course, by Ridley Scott. It stars Denzel Washington, Russell Crowe, Chiwetel Ejiofor, and Idris Elba is also in it before he gets shot in the fucking head. Matt, you've already kind of previewed what we're going to talk about here today, but what did you think of American Gangster?
Enjoyed the hell out of this viewing. It's funny because as I was getting into it, I think you and I almost had exactly the same reaction, which was like, oh my God, 2.5 hours again. You know, and this actually keeps happening where like I look at the trailer, I look at the movie, I'm like, that looks boring and slow, and it's 2.5 hours long. I'm basically gonna have to grit my teeth to get through this. And then I just enjoy myself so much, and I come away with an even greater appreciation for Ridley Scott, which is not where I expected to be at this point. At this point in this journey, I expected to be like, yeah, and then he got kind of full of himself and started doing these boring movies. But I just haven't found that to be true, really. I enjoyed this movie quite a lot. I thought it was, very, very like lush is the word I reach for some reason. Like it's sort of a straightforward, simple crime movie plot-wise, but just like visually and performance-wise, and sort of just texturally in every way, it's really sucks you in. I mean, I it's funny to say this actually, but I think this might be one of my favorite crime movies, even though I would not have said that like 3 days ago.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. That's great. Yeah, I think just to remind the audience, since we're on film 17 and month 52 of our Ridley Scott series, going into this, my big problem with Ridley Scott, and the thing I said about him at the beginning was, I think Alien is his best movie, and it all kind of went downhill from here. And I think I've joked around many times about how I think Ridley Scott is a robot that doesn't understand how humans behave, because a lot of the movies honestly in this time period, I think made me feel like, oh, why aren't these people behaving like humans? They're not reacting like humans. And again and again and again, I just find myself saying, Scott, what were you talking about? Because I think this movie in particular, here's another movie, where we have two characters that are remarkably human, that like are fascinating and complicated and rich and messy, and I just loved this movie so much. I agree with you. I mean, I guess this is like Ridley Scott by way of Martin Scorsese, in that
Mhm.
he's trying to do his big epic gangster film, but he's also obviously like, this movie doesn't feel like a Scorsese film at all. Like, this
No.
feels like a Ridley Scott film, and I love it. I love what it's doing. I love the clever things it's kind of saying about America. Like, I mean, like, it's really funny that I was pointing this out to you, that like everyone that's in top billing in this movie is not an American except
Uh-huh.
for Denzel Washington. That's it. Like,
Yeah.
Ridley Scott's not an American. Russell Crowe is not an American. Chiwetel Ejiofor, not an American. Idris Elba, not an American. Is Josh Brolin American? I don't know.
Pretty sure he is. He
He
sounds
is,
very
yeah.
American, you know, but he might be like Canadian or something for all I know.
It looks like he was born in Santa Monica, so he is
Okay.
American. But yeah, it's just wild to me that this is a movie that is unapologetic at the massive swipes it's taking at America, and you know, the systems in place in America, and the concept of the American dream, and all these things. It is not holding back at all.
It does kind of feel like an outsider's take on things, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair for sure.
I don't know if I'd position it as being quite so aggressive as what you just said, because to me, it's like you've got these two main characters, Russell Crowe and Denzel Washington. I mean, those are the actors, you know what I mean, and they're sort of. It's one of those great movies where the movie has a thesis, it has a sort of thematic contention, and the two characters are embodying these two different views of what America is. But what's interesting is they also have a lot in common.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because you could have made sort of a movie like this where one of them is just bad and one of them is just good, right? And it at times it does feel like that. But Denzel's character has this streak of like, there's a right way to do things. There is a code. You know, respect is important. Treating people right in certain ways according to a certain ethos is right. And in his mind, like, the police and the authorities have have abnegated themselves as a moral authority, decades and decades ago. So for him, right and wrong has nothing to do with obeying the authorities. He has his own code of right and wrong, though. He has his own strong moral code. It just has nothing to do with what the authorities say. And it's interesting because, of course, Russell Crowe's character is very much the same. He is a cop, but he is a cop who basically agrees with Denzel about all that stuff. Like, he agrees that the police have abnegated their responsibility as the valid and appropriate enforcers of the law because they're all corrupt. He believes he's a policeman. He's a Boy Scout, right? They call him Boy Scout because he has this firm ethical code of things. There is a right way to do things, and the organization he's in, which is the cops, aren't doing it that way. So they both it's fun to me because they're obviously on opposite sides, and obviously Denzel is bringing drugs into the country and selling drugs, and it's this huge actual social problem. And Russell Crowe's character is, I'm going to stop that because I'm the shining knight, right? But fundamentally, like, at their core level, they're very similar characters, and so that allows, I think, this fun conflict to play out where it's sort of both of them versus the system, actually, in a certain way.
Sure. Yeah.
And yeah. Go ahead.
I like that a lot. I mean, I guess what I want to make clear here that is Frank Lucas is a monster. And I'm not speaking of the man who existed in real life. I don't know. I don't know how much of this is historically accurate. My guess is not very much. But as depicted in this movie, this man is a monster. I mean, the introduction to Frank Lucas in this movie is him setting a man on fire and then shooting at his burning corpse multiple times. Like, the movie does not hold back in its depiction of this man as kind of an unhinged monster, but he is also extremely likable. And you're exactly right. He has this streak to him that kind of endears you to him in a lot of ways. On the other side of the coin, Russell Crowe is an angel, the perfect cop, right? The person that, like, if every cop was more like Russell Crowe's character, then the police would probably be a thing that we don't despise, but that we worship. You know,
Yeah.
like if this is what policing was, if this is what police were, then maybe we would we would like police more. But he's also kind of an asshole. He's a lush, like he's just the subplot of this movie where every single fucking woman that sees Russell Crowe immediately wants to have sex with him is like, it's hilarious. And like, look, Russell Crowe's a very attractive man. I think it's funny because like he's a little bit bigger in this movie. Like he's not like his svelte gladiator self, but like I still totally believe that every woman that walks by him is like, yeah, I'm gonna fuck that guy.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. And so like,
yeah,
you're absolutely right. We have these two people coming from the entirely opposite poles as far as morality, as far as, you know, what they want and what they want to do. And they do have this thing in common. They have this thing in common, which is the system is broken, and Denzel is the type of person that's going to take advantage of that brokenness to get himself what he wants. And Russell Crowe's Richie Roberts is the type of person that's just kind of going to attempt to fix the system. And they end up coming together in the end to do just that.
Yeah. I mean, I may have somewhat oversold their similarities. I think that was just in an attempt to say, despite their many obvious textual differences, they do have this core similarity. And really kind of the root of what I was trying to say is like the movie is sort of about a struggle for the soul of what is America. Mm-hmm. You know, it's because you mentioned the American dream, and it's like, well, if the idea, I don't think it's as simple as like, the American dream is a lie. The only way to rise in this country is to lie, cheat, and steal and smuggle drugs, because ultimately that's proven to be wrong by the end. That the good guy, you know, does the right thing, stands up against the system, and then the moral, you know, the moral foundations of the movie are that ultimately we reject these guys. You know, as far as I know, it's a true fact that like the you know, the sting led to like, it says in the movie, the arrest of 75% of the New York City narcotics division.
3/4 of the drug police in New York City were on the take. That is fucking insane.
Right.
And I mean, honestly, it was probably more than 3/4. They just didn't have enough evidence on the other fourth to actually convict. That's fucking crazy, man. Yeah. And I think that is a true fact. That is not something that was embellished for the film. That's nuts.
Yeah. Which is fascinating, and a sort of like you know, we won. You know, we America conquered this you know, infestation of
I guess, but like that's one thing that I think it's interesting the movie does not reckon with is the reality of, but like there's still a lot of corruption and the drug war is still ongoing, and we have a big drug problem. Like none of that is solved by this movie, and I you know, there could have been a point in the movie where Ridley Scott tries to nail that at the end of like, yes, we did all this stuff, but I guess maybe there is. I don't know. What is your interpretation of the last like 10 seconds of the movie where we see Denzel get out? He walks out onto the street and you know, different music is playing. He kind of looks out. He looks briefly lost in a world that has fundamentally changed since he was in it.
I think it's so. I guess I do want to directly answer your question, but first I want to address like the last 5 to 10 minutes of the movie,
sure,
which feels totally different from the rest of the movie because, you know, suddenly Denzel and Russell Crowe are like on the same side, and they're like best buds, and they're laughing and joking. Like you've never seen either of these men crack a smile in the entire movie. So it kind of feels jarring when they're like joking around and like there's like a montage. It's like we suddenly rush through what should be like 6 months of time, but we do it in like montage, and then it's like blah, 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 bam, movie ends.
Yeah.
And then we do like you know, the title card, you know, giving you info about what happened. And then we like slam into that ending shot that you just described, and it kind of like, this is my only real criticism of the movie, is like it feels so tonally sort of off kilter from the whole rest of the movie, and even sort of thematically off kilter, because you're like, this isn't what I felt like we were building toward really. But then it's one of these cases where it's limited by being a true story. So anyway, I mean, the last scene I'm pretty sure is just supposed to mean, you know, that then he was left with nothing, right? Like, it's funny because that last shot is in my opinion the right last shot for this movie, because it shows what his mom said would happen is what happened. He ended up with nobody. His wife left him, his mom, his brothers left him, everybody, everybody left him. He was totally alone, regardless of the fact that he had, done the right thing in the end. He was still totally alone. And that felt like a good ending shot. It's just that juxtaposed with the 5 to 10 minutes that preceded it felt kind of weird to me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you, and I think it's a major bummer considering I think the sequence where they kind of square off with each other in the interview table is one of my favorite sequences in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so great, and I love the use of the coffee cups as a prop to like show the way the battle of wits between these two very intelligent men is going back and forth, and they're like pushing the coffee cup across the table after Denzel loses it and throws his across the room. And I think that whole thing is very effective and very dramatic because you're kind of wondering what's going to happen there, and like there's a brief moment where you kind of forget yourself and go, oh, is he going to take the money this time? Is he? No, of course he's not. Of course he's not. I just love that sequence. And then I think what they did and what they had to do was, the truth of this movie is that Richie Roberts did defend Frank Lucas as his first client when he became a defense attorney. That did happen. And then, I mean, the other fact that I learned after watching this movie is that Frank Lucas named Richie Roberts as the godfather to one of his children. So like, obviously this experience they had with each other endeared them to each other in a certain kind of way. I'm not saying they're like best buddies that like chill. And if you're trying to make a movie that captures that, how do you do that in a way that doesn't take a whole movie to do it? Because
right.
you can't build that up over time, right? Because that's like the story you want to tell is the rise and fall of Frank Lucas, and so you can't build up their relationship over time because we don't need to see the after the fall stuff. So I think this is it's really just their attempt at a fast forward version of how they became endeared with each other. But I totally understand why you found that a little off-putting. It didn't bother me as much as you did, but I totally get it.
Yeah. It's just one of those things, where I'm really not letting it bother me all that much. It's more just like, this is one of those limitations when you're doing a true story where you end up with this leftover detail of like, and then they became friends, and you're like, wow, that's just too compelling not to put in the story. Except what the story we just told is what you just said. It's the rise and fall of Frank Lucas. It's it's this type of specific story, and it's which it executes on perfectly, right? It executes on that absolutely perfectly. It's one of my favorite implementations of that, actually, because maybe I'm a weirdo, but like a lot of these gangster flicks that are basically the same thing, where it's like, this mob guy becomes, really powerful and rises up through the ranks, but then hubris and then he falls. Like I often find that to be sort of tired and like, I find it very difficult to empathize with. Like I found it interestingly much easier to empathize with this character than with any of these other mobster, sort of monstrous characters. And I haven't figured out why exactly, beyond just Denzel is very good at his job.
That's what I was going to say. I think the secret sauce here is Denzel Washington, the greatest living actor. The funny thing is, if you listen to this podcast enough, you will listen to me call like 47 different people the greatest living actor, and I'm totally fine with that. But I love Denzel Washington, man. I think he's so good, and yeah, I think he can take even the biggest monster and make him a character that you for some reason find yourself rooting for. I think that was the weirdest thing in the world to me, where I know this guy's bad. There's so many sequences in which you see the horrible destructive effects of the thing that he's selling. Like I loved the Thanksgiving sequence. Oh my God, that was so good, where we see, Richie's making his tuna fish and potato chip sandwich, and Denzel's like eating this big feast, and then we cut to these poor junkies dying in the street. and it's a perfect sequence, and I love it, and I totally never forgot how much of a monster Frank Lucas was. But then there's a moment where like the jig is finally up and his plane's about to get caught with all his drugs, and there was a part of my brain that went, oh man.
Right.
I was like, wait a minute, no, I want him to fail. It's
Yeah.
this is the fascinating thing about movies like this and actors like this, is that you both, I wanted both of these characters to succeed for some fucked up reason.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the filmmaking, right? Like it's,
Mhm.
you know, just, you know, Goodfellas or whatever. Like I never wanted the Goodfellas characters to succeed. I wanted all of them to be buried in the ground dead. And I think that movie wanted me to feel that way, actually.
Yeah.
This movie, I think, wants you to understand this Denzel Washington's character and empathize with the world that he exists in and the life that he's lived. This is what it makes sense for him to do. You know, he's going to do these things for reasons that if you were in his position, those reasons would make sense to you. We're not all cold-blooded killers. You'll just snap and kill somebody with a piano. But I think a lot of us can relate to like feelings of like resentment and like being owed something, and then like, well, I'm going to go, well, fine. If you're not going to like respect me the way I feel like I deserve, I'm going to go out and get what I deserve. And it's just more, it is just more admirable. Like the fact that he's doing it to get heroin to sell to kids is sort of something that you're able to like mentally separate from the fact that like, well, he's taking the risk onto himself, and he's, you know, he's doing all these things, and he's smart and he's clever and he's ambitious. And like, he has, I think one way to put it is just like, we were talking about the character Jazal on the book club the other day, which I'm going to explain that reference for people, is like, he's a character who kind of sucks in a lot of ways, but he has a few distinct admirable qualities. And I think as long as you've given your character a few distinct admirable qualities, you can at least connect to those, while at the same time being like, yeah, I mean, obviously he's a monster, but like, he's kind of a badass.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. And obviously part of this to me is that he is doing the American dream. This is kind of why I brought, I mean, like he is, like he says, I have a product. My product is better than my competition, and I am selling it at a price cheaper than my competition because I can afford to. You know, he's picking himself up by his bootstraps. You know, he's creating his own company. He's doing all the things that we're kind of told are the admirable qualities that lead to success in this country. He's doing them, and he's succeeding at them. It just so happens that the thing that he's doing is terrible and monstrous and should be illegal forever. That's my hot take for this movie. Heroin should be illegal forever. Heroin is awful. No one should ever get to use heroin. Hot take. But yeah, I mean, I think that's part of why he's admirable. And one of the most fascinating sequences in the movie to me is when they have impounded the military plane, and Russell Crowe is starting to look through the coffins of the soldiers, and he's interrupted by that government official who's like outraged that he's doing this, that he's, if they find drugs there, that means the US Army will have been smuggling in drugs, and he can't allow that. And they have this whole conversation, and it starts as this noble, like, we can't let the military be tarred that way, and then it quickly turns into just like super racism. Like he just goes from, you know, from no, we can't say that the military is responsible to this, to say like no N-word has ever been able to do what the Italians, you know, and then he's calling Russell Crowe a slur too, because Russell Crowe's character in this movie is Jewish. So like, it's just it goes from a conversation where this guy's mean to just immediate racism, and you're like, oh, we're doing something here. We're saying something here, that the root of so much of this is just race, is just racism, and that is, I think, also why, you know, Denzel Washington's character is something that you do kind of want to look up to and see succeed, because he is battling back against a system that has completely dismissed him. And so there's a lot of this it's America, right? It's complicated, it's confusing. There are good parts and there are bad parts, and drugs are bad, and the war on drugs was a political move meant specifically to incarcerate black people, but also probably shouldn't let this guy sell pure heroin on the streets that is murdering people. So
Right.
it's complex, and I love it for it.
No, I mean it's funny. Like I agree. The racism angle is throughout everything, right? Because the Italians kind of invite him in, and they're willing to do business with him, right? And then and it's funny because in that moment you're almost like, yeah, progress. But then they turn on him, and you get I don't know that the movie says this textually, but you get the feeling that, like, if he had been an Italian guy who had been in the same exact position, they would not have turned on him. That they specifically turned on him because it was unacceptable for a black man to be like, to have the edge on them, to basically have power over them.
Yep.
I think that the way he said it actually was, they work for me now.
Yep.
And that was intolerable to them. And they sort of self-owned, right, by doing what they did, by going after him.
Yeah. Armand Asante as the Italian gangster was just so good.
Yeah, he was great.
He
was really good,
I totally agree. I mean, that's the central that's the central thing here, is that, like, not only is he doing this, but he's a black man doing this. That's unacceptable to everyone. But yeah, I mean, like, it's amazing how just like how corrupt everything is in this movie. Like we already mentioned 3/4, but like the idea that just the detective, played wonderfully by Josh Brolin, will just in broad daylight just like pull over Denzel and just hit him up for an extra take. It's just like, my God, the fucking balls on these people, because they own the city. They don't. It's just, man, it's just incredible.
Yeah, I love that. There's like that posse of cops who are all dressed like gangsters, right? And they have, Josh Brolin has my dream car, and it's like they, very intentionally. I think it's very intentional that they're dressed like gangsters. They look like gangsters because they are gangsters functionally. Yep. The cops are just one other gang.
They're the quintessential American gangster, right?
Yeah,
because they represent authority. They are authority. They have been blessed by the state with authority in America. And
just to say it out loud, I mean, the movie is called American Gangster, right? Not the Denzel Washington character story or whatever. It's
Frank Lucas,
Frank Lucas story. It's about America. It's about, and I mean, you could even, I agree with you. You could make the sort of the not quite joke, but observation that, like, well, who in this movie is the American gangster?
Everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Sort of everyone except Russell Crowe, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah, it's very, very cool. Very good movie. I guess, I forgot how much the action sequence whips ass, or just the action in general.
Yeah, please, let's talk about that.
Like, so just, recentering the directing as a thing, like, that was an amazing sequence. That was so good. It
just kind of comes out of nowhere. This is like a very calm, chill movie. I mean, there are sequences of tension and stuff, but nothing quite like this. And then suddenly, like, it just like the tension boils over and the gunfight starts, and you're just there. And then, like, I think Ridley Scott uses something he hasn't used too much in the past. He uses a lot of shaky cam in this sequence, like, especially when I think Russell Crowe's running down the hallway to chase after the brother character, and he just goes like full shaky cam, and it never bothered me in the way shaky cam sometimes does. I think I wish I like knew the trick of how he did this, where I could still follow the action, like it wasn't completely disorienting, but it was so effective, and God, it was so good.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because you said there was shaky cam, but it didn't bother you. For me, there was a tremendous amount of fast cutting, which usually bothers me as like a pet peeve, or at least reminds me that I'm watching a movie, And this time it really didn't. Like, there are moments in that shootout where the cuts are like every half second, and it's just totally chaotic, and yet you're really keeping track of the angles and where people are coming from and who's doing what and who's where. And it's great because you're really invested in all these cop characters. You're also invested in several of these gangster characters in different ways. And so when people are getting blown away, you really care, like you feel it one way or the other.
And yet it doesn't like pause on it to let you like one of the most interesting choices to me was we see the baseball kid get killed.
Yeah.
Like we see him get hit by a shotgun blast and killed.
Mm-hmm.
And the movie doesn't like pause to have this like in a typical moment where like the camera sits on his dead face just so you can go like, "Aw, here's a kid who had his whole future ahead of him and was possibly have a great baseball career, and he decided instead to be a gangster like his uncle, or and what a fucking idiot." It just kind of shows him get blown away, and then it lets all that other stuff just happen in your head as the action sequence goes on. And I don't know why that worked better on me than it would have the other way, but it did. Like I appreciated that. Like we don't have to have this overly sentimental moment. We just see him get hit, and then we're like, "Oh man, you fucking you idiot."
If I remember correctly, like he's sort of like fairly graphically splattered, and we see Chiwetel Ejiofor like react with shock, but it's like it's very quick, as you said.
It's very quick. Yeah, it doesn't sit on it.
It's basically he like sort of flinches away with like a shocked and horrified expression, and then he's just running. Yeah. It's not a pause at all.
Like you would think a different person would maybe like, that wasn't his kid, right? That was another one of the brother's kids, I think.
Yeah, I don't think that was his kid, because that would have, because if it was, it wouldn't. I would have a problem, actually.
Yeah,
no, I don't think that was his kid.
It is really interesting because, like, I don't know, you watch these sequences, and me being the non-gangster that I am, like, I see, I don't know, if I were in a heroin manufacturing thing and a cop came to my door, I would just be like, "Okay, you got me.
You got us, yeah."
I'm just gonna go quietly. But like the fact that these people like pull out guns and start like, what is your end game there? You're not gonna win. You're not gonna like defeat the police force. You're not gonna defeat the federal government here. What's like, and so like you watch them all like do this, and then the one person that doesn't actually is his brother, who just fucking sees his nephew get blown away and just says bye and just pieces out. And so like him compared to the other, you're like, oh, these are like, one of the things that you notice about gangster films in general is just like how all this loyalty, all this family loyalty, all this stuff goes right the fuck out the window the second you've got yourself in a little bit of trouble. I mean, that's how they get him, right? They get him because his cousin just did some stupid shit, just decided to get drunk and shoot his girlfriend. And it's like, oh, well, we got you now. You gonna roll over on your cousin? And he's like, yep, I am. Here I am. Let's
no problem. Yeah. Just to briefly, like my explanation for why you would shoot back in that situation, and obviously my knowledge of this also comes from movies, so I'm not some expert on this, but like my understanding is that if you're gonna go rob a fellow drug dealer, then you might want to pretend that you're the cops. And so if the cops come bashing on your door when you're counting your heroin, then you should probably just assume, you should probably just be on a posture of like, it doesn't matter if they say they're the cops. We have to, like that doesn't give me license to just give up, right?
Sure.
But I don't know. I don't know, man.
See, this is why I would never make it as a gangster. I'm gonna go ahead and not try.
Yeah. The one fun thing about this movie, and I think I was wondering what you were thinking as I was texting you some of these things today, because I was thinking like this is a movie that got me thinking like how would I be a gangster? Like what would I do? Which is interesting because I've watched as many gangster films as anybody. I've never really thought about it as hard as this movie made me think about it. And I think this is because the movie really kind of pulls you through in an almost technical procedural way the manner in which he builds his empire. He establishes reputation for himself as like the guy who's willing to shoot a man in cold blood on the street. He builds his business contacts and his sort of private networks and his loyalty networks and his family network, where he basically goes and gets his family, and he's like, I know that I can't trust all these guys, so you guys, my family, are the ones that I'm going to put in positions of power, because I know you're at least less likely to turn on me than just some random guy. And so like there's all these little things he does, and we see him make these decisions in a very calculated way, and it kind of gets you thinking like, oh yeah, that does make sense. But then also I was like, but I probably wouldn't murder as many people because that just makes enemies. But then I was thinking like, but people do have to be afraid of you to hold that job. People
I
totally.
love that you were thinking about this.
I was thinking about this. I was thinking about it very seriously because it's like, could you get away with being a mob boss who just never murdered anybody? And the answer I think is no.
I think you
Because
just get killed.
yeah, people wouldn't be afraid of you. Somebody else would muscle you out. Yeah, which is interesting, I guess. I don't know. It really kind of like got my intellectual, analytical juices flowing more than most gangster films.
This is the type of thing where like I just don't think I would be able to live like this. I think I would. The anxiety would just be overwhelming. There's this idea of living in a place where, oh yeah, you don't have to worry about money. You got money coming in, but like people are going to betray you. People are going to kill you. Like you can't trust anyone. I mean, like I think it is smart to try to bring your family in, but that's assuming that you can completely trust your family, who we see here are just dumb fuck ups, a lot of them, that just do stupid shit. Because I don't know, you just give a guy millions of dollars and just say, hey, don't spend it.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. I love the details of like his whole rule about like, don't be extravagant, don't draw attention to yourself, don't do these kind of things. And he breaks his rule one time. One time he breaks his rule because he wants to make his wife happy because she bought him this outrageous fur coat. And then that is the one time that he gets noticed, and that is what leads to all this. And that's one of those things that I just doubt that's the way it happened in real life. It's like it's too kismet for that. But it's very effective in this movie.
Yeah, well, and now that you're pointing that out, like I think there's a very strong pattern. In fact, there were some scenes that were in the movie where I was. Again, I have very, very few criticisms, but there were a couple of scenes where I was like, I don't think this really needed to be in the movie. I think this could have been cut for time because I don't think it adds anything. But what those scenes are, what they're usually doing is there are moments where somebody does something dumb and Denzel has to show up or kill somebody with a piano lid to be like, stop doing this shit. Like this is the one thing we can't afford. We can like... Everything will be great if we can just keep things on the down low and seem very respectable. And it emphasizes how he goes about his life in this extremely regimented way to draw no attention to himself. And then he's got brothers and cousins and stuff like owning nightclubs and being super flamboyant and dressing ridiculously and drawing all this attention. And then him having to go like talk to them about it. And
him having to talk to Cuba Gooding Jr. about cutting his shit. I love that conversation. It's like, this is my brand. That you don't have to do this. You don't have to do this. You can just sell it. You can just sell it, and you'll get infinity money. And it's like you feel his frustration there, and that's this is like, I think one of the tragedies of this whole thing is like, this guy is smart. He's effective. He's a person that can get the job done. If he didn't pick an illegal thing to make his career, he could have probably been successful at that too. Or maybe perhaps one of the things that the movie is saying is, no, he actually couldn't have, because a black man at that time, it doesn't matter how smart and effective you are. Like, you do this thing because this is kind of one of the only options that's out there for you, because that's the way the system has made it. And like, the reason he was tolerated for so long, we see it in the Josh Brolin character. It's like, we got to keep this cash cow coming. This guy's making us money, and so we're going to allow him to do this right up until the time where he stops making us money. It's just fucking insane. But
yeah, that one moment was kind of fascinating. How Josh Brolin comes by and he's literally like assuming that Russell Crowe and his team understand the way things are done, and like, obviously we're what are you guys doing? You're gonna scare the gangsters, and we're gonna
well, he walks in and he sees like all the pictures on their board, like of the faces and stuff, like the investigation board, and he's like, what are you gonna actually try to arrest him? Like, are you actually doing police work? What It's so fucking wild.
Yeah.
It's such a good scene. There's so many good sequences like that. Like this is a really great collection of scenes, I think, because I agree with you. There's moments like this is a long movie, and there's moments like, did we really need this? I mean, there's stuff like with Richie where he goes to his childhood friend's house, and his childhood friend is showing him this new invention called the microwave, and then like I loved that sequence where he's like, yeah, look, we just got back from this beautiful ski house in Aspen. It's like great, and he's just like, "Eh, it's your house." Like the way he's just like so like you can tell he doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to cross the line with his friend, and yet he feels like he has to because he's like terrified.
Right.
And Richie's reaction is just so perfect. Why are you doing this? Why you're ruining everything. You know what this means, right? You're ruining everything. Like, and
Yeah.
it's just such an effective little sequence because like you're just seeing what it means to be the good guy, actually, what it means to do the right thing, and what that effect that has on you. There's so many sequences like that, where like the three beat of him not taking the money, his partner being a junkie that ends up dead, his childhood friend that actually is going to hurt his chance at keeping his kids because he's associating with known criminals, but like these are the people he grew up with. Like all these moments, just like it sucks to do the right thing. It actually really sucks.
Yeah. I think one reason I like this movie more than I did when it came out is like I'm just better at watching movies now, and I'm able to just kind of casually appreciate how all these elements do actually connect narratively. Because like I mean, perfect example, like him going the first time he goes to his friend's house, his his rich gangster mobbed up friend. You're like, where are we going with this? This is a pretty, like, nothing really happens in this scene actually, right? But then I don't think that I don't think I'm saying like, well, therefore the scene should have been cut. Like, it's actually pretty important to establish this relationship with his friend. You establish a few other pieces of information about his relationship with his his ex-wife and the stakes that are happening there, and just the general. It's I would actually say pretty important scene, and I think that young Matt just absolutely didn't understand what role it was serving actually. It would have just been like, this is slow, I'm bored. I don't like to be too hard on young Matt, but definitely just a totally different experience watching this movie now.
Yeah, completely. I think it's just it's I'm sorry, I can't stop thinking about how magical microwaves are, and how they just 50 years ago people were like, oh, here's the Star Trek device
right
that just like magically heats up.
Yes, it uses a principle of physics like atomic energy.
But I think one of the things that I did want to talk about in relation to what you're talking about there is the women in this movie. I do think like there's this one kind of commonality in gangster movies, I think, is that the women characters always kind of get a short shrift a little bit. I just don't think they ever have too much to do outside of being like mad at the gangster, like their gangster husband. Like I think actually I will say that Goodfellas does a better job than this movie. I think Frank Lucas's wife Ava here just doesn't really ever have anything to do really. I think they give his mom like one scene, and it was a scene that got her nominated for an Academy Award, and that's it. But like I don't think Richie's wife really has anything to do here. Carla Gugino. I don't think Frank's wife has anything to do in this movie. It's never really about them, and so there's just nothing for them. I mean, they're there just to like be the angry wife, and that's about it.
Angry wife, disappointed mom. Yeah, they're there to bounce off of the gangster characters. Yeah, this is always the problem. I mean, yeah, it's just the nature of this. You're basically talking about the real world, where these are extremely sexist organizations where it's only the men who are allowed to make decisions. So it's just kind of where you are.
It's a product of it being true story, certainly. But yeah, I don't know. I felt like some people don't agree with this, but I do feel like Goodfellas like really really explored Ray Liotta's character's wife a little bit more, and like
Sure.
I don't know. I think there's a fascinating story to be told of the type of person that gets in league with these people, where like you kind of understand why, because like here's this guy just walks up to you and he's like everyone around him like respects him totally. He commands the room, and he has infinity money, and like not just money but power and respect, and like you totally buy into this whole lifestyle and love it.
Yeah.
And then of course the truth of what that lifestyle means eventually rears its head, and realize how like stop being a gangster even though I married you because you were a gangster. Like that's a fascinating story, and I mean it's not like it hasn't been told before. Other gangster movies have done it, but that's again not really what this movie is interested in doing.
You know, you've kicked me onto a tangent, which I'm going to go down just 'cause I think it's kind of fun. I've always kind of thought that the fun thing about gangster movies is that they're basically about like like modern day feudalism, like
Sure, yeah.
Game of Thrones shit, where it's like what is Ned Stark really? Like he's sort of a mafia don. You know, he uses violence to solve his problems pretty often.
He provides protection.
He provides protection to the people who work under him, who then pay him taxes. I mean, it's very, very similar sort of arrangement. And I'm not the first person to notice this, obviously. But like I think that's why these types of stories appeal to us, is like those sorts of characters and those sorts of relationships and those sorts of dynamics appeal to us. And I'm just saying that to say that I totally agree with you, because the cool thing about Game of Thrones specifically is like you've got these great characters like Arya and Sansa and Catelyn, who are the women in the situation who are disempowered by the patriarchal nature of their world, and yet the fact that they're disempowered and they have to struggle so hard is what makes them great characters. Mm-hmm. So like like you could totally do that exact same thing with like a mafia don's wife, daughter, however else you want to play it, right?
Yeah.
And how they deal with their situation. Like that could be a great story. And I agree. Like I don't remember ever quite seeing that done. And now I want to write that. So good idea, Scott.
Yeah, great. So I guess one of the things I did want to talk to you about is I love how the movie like brings up a thing and then calls it bullshit. Like one of the things I'm thinking about is we meet Bumpy at the end, at the beginning of the movie rather, and he's giving this speech that I think we've heard before, right? About how like America has lost its way. You know, like there used to be the independent corner store, and now there's a supermarket. Like it's a McDonald's here now. It's this tale of like commercialization and corporatization of America. And he's sitting there bitching about it and complaining about it. And it's a thing that like you can get behind. Like I wish things were more locally owned. I think that's more interpersonal is good. But then he finishes the speech by saying it's impossible to find the heart of a thing anymore, so you can put a knife in it. And so like his actual complaint here is that it's much easier to take advantage of a small independent store owner than it is a big giant corporation. It's much easier to squeeze them for money. It's much easier to get them on the take and control them than this big thing. And I mean, I think that's a comment on how like the person that is the organization that is big enough to do that kind of squeezing at that kind of large level is the state itself. And I don't know, I loved that because like it's just the way this movie manipulates you, because I was listening to this guy's speech, this guy who we meet, standing next to Denzel Washington setting this man on fire, but then we cut immediately from that to him opening up a truck and just giving free turkeys away to poor people. Like this man who is both a horrible monster and a man of the people, talking about how America's lost its way, specifically because it's making it harder for me to exploit people for their money. And I like it's just wonderful.
It's pretty funny. It's a great moment. The department store, and it's so like sterile and literally empty, right? Like like he has a heart attack and Denzel can't even find anyone to help. No, that's really funny. The idea that I don't know, man. I'm like processing that in real time. That is great. it brings up these ideas, but it kind of undercuts, because it's so funny, because you're totally right that like the idea of like, we used to be a proper country is like this meme, and it's like, well, actually the movie's kind of saying those weren't the greatest days.
No.
um
Yeah.
Maybe we're like, maybe things are actually getting better, and it does, it does then prompt Denzel to have to go to to Bangkok to get the drugs. But so there's another thing, which I don't know if I can tie this in very elegantly, but clearly the movie is bringing in all this Vietnam imagery and Vietnam sort of the themes of like what has America done? Like America has committed this great. America has lost its way in so many ways. It's lost its way with this drug epidemic, and then sort of the corrupt response to the drug epidemic. It's lost its way with this involvement in Vietnam, where if I'm not mistaken, we jump through time so much that we sort of see different eras of how the Vietnam War was going, right? Or am I?
I think when he goes the first time, I think it's 1969. So we're near the tail end of.
Okay. Okay.
Well, not tail end is the wrong word, but I think in '69 we had been in Vietnam for a bit,
Okay.
right?
Yeah, so I guess it's a more compressed timeline than I was kind of thinking. That's okay.
But
yeah,
your point stands, though. I think the idea that the metaphorical idea of someone going to Vietnam and bringing this poison home with them is certainly like we shouldn't have been there in the first place. Like we shouldn't have been to this place, and we're going to come back from this place, and what are we going to bring with us? Death and poison, and like it's a place we shouldn't have gone. We shouldn't have been in there, a war we shouldn't have been fighting, and the result of it is our boys are going to come home either in a body bag or poisoned with this terrible stuff that's then going to spread around the rest of the country and kill us. It's fantastic imagery, and I mean, also just so happens to be true, because that's there's a lot of part of this movie aren't true, but that Frank Lucas like went to the supplier in Vietnam is a truism of what happened.
And it's just such a sort of poetic corruption, statement about the corruption, or statement about the insidiousness of the corruption, that they brought home the drugs in the plane containing the dead soldiers. So not only are the cops corrupt, but the army is corrupt. I mean,
not only in the planes, but in the coffins. Like,
yeah.
Jesus Christ. Like, I mean, you can't help but be a little disgusted when he opens that first coffin and then opens the body bag and starts rifting around in there. Like, I was a little bit like, no, don't do that. That's a dead soldier who died. That's awful. Like, but yeah, that's what they exploited. That's what they were going after, is this idea that like, no one's going to check this because it's the coffin of a dead soldier.
Right.
We're exploiting. It's awful.
And it was corrupt soldiers who did that is the thing, right? It's not somebody else. I love the choice when they first go into the jungle, to have Denzel dressed in khakis with the American flag on his shoulder, and he's got an M16. Like, he's dressed as a soldier. Like he's lit. And because I was thinking about this while I was watching it, I was like, why dress him as a soldier? Like, I was thinking inside the logic of the movie. I was like, wouldn't you not want to look like a soldier? And then as I was kind of going back and forth, and then I was like, well, wait a minute. Like, thematically, it makes perfect sense that he would be dressed as a soldier, because he is of America, and this is another instance of the corruption of this symbolism of America, that we have this future mob don in an American soldier uniform, sort of representing America in a way, right? It's brilliant. I love it.
Well, and the double dealing of like, we're in Vietnam, trying to oust some Vietnamese, that the Vietnamese we don't like, and then we have this man who's dealing with them, because if I'm not mistaken, the general that he's dealing with to get the heroin is like a North Vietnamese general, right? Like, I don't think this is the side we're trying to win independence for that he's dealing with.
I believe there's an ADR line where they say this is the army of Chiang Kai-shek, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which would be like the bad guys,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The quote, yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's fabulous that he's wearing the uniform of an American soldier that is in there to fight a war against these people while also cutting deals with him for himself. That's America.
And
We'll
this is
fight
some
you, but we'll make some money off of you too.
absolutely that's yeah. But this is like the great, these little directing choices, right? Or I mean, I guess it's a costuming choice, but fundamentally, the costuming choices are made on the basis of like what are we doing here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I could imagine that Ridley would have that level of granular, thinking about like what is Denzel going to be wearing in this scene. Oh, obviously he's going to be wearing an American soldier uniform. That's too perfect to miss.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, uh, just yeah, we haven't talked a ton about Ridley's visuals lately. I guess off and on we do. We do when it's appropriate. This was a movie that sort of nothing was too visually flashy.
Mm-mm.
Nothing really drew attention to itself in that kind of artistic way that I think he can do when he wants. But at the same time, it was just beautiful. Like that's why I used the word lush earlier. Like just the color and the richness and it's the 70s, right? And like the
Yeah.
costuming is like my favorite thing. It's like I think the leather jackets budgeted in this movie must have been millions of dollars by itself. It's just so good.
It is so good. I think I said to you, like, if the 70s fashion came back in a good way, I'd be totally fine with it. I wish I could
Mhm.
get away with wearing some stuff like this. Yeah, I mean, the composition of the movie is really good. I think that like there's a color palette you put on your film to just make it seem 70s, and that's a lot of browns and yellows. And like I'm looking at a here, I'll send it to you, but I'm looking at a picture right now that is just like if you didn't know what era this picture took place in, you would know immediately just by the color palette, not even by the outfits the characters are wearing, but just the colors. And it's really really beautiful. I love the composition. I love, when we see every time we see money in this movie, the money is like really dirty. Like
Mhm.
it's never clean or crisp. Even the money that Richie gets from the government to help with the sting operation, it's like dirty and grimy, and like like it's never there's never clean. Nothing's ever really clean in this
Mhm.
movie. And
It's interesting, yeah. It's it's interesting to me that I wasn't constantly thinking about Black Rain while watching this movie. Um, and why I say that is it's like, well, wouldn't you expect a person to be comparing this gangster movie to the other gangster movie by the same director? I mean,
I totally forgot that movie existed. So
I sort of forgot that movie existed, and it's sort of also not a gangster movie. It's more of a buddy cop movie, but like it's got gangsters in it. But the point is, it looks very, very, very different, actually. And it
mhm.
feels very different, right? These are two very different movies, even though it's the same director and they're both really crime films. Um, and that movie felt dirty in a very different way than this movie feels dirty, even though I totally agree with you that both movies actually do feel dirty. Um, one interesting thing that I noticed was just like certain very, very specific visual touchstones, like the way the heroin bricks look is like they're stamped with like this very specific pattern of uh, you know uh, symbols and
Mhm.
logos and color of paper and everything, so you can always recognize, oh shit, they got the heroin bricks in their car, right? Like you can recognize it just from a single flash of an image.
Sure.
And it's important to be consistent about these things, and that's the kind of thing that really is good at, is painting the picture using the elements and having like this really precise control over those elements. But just to
Yeah.
return to what you said about everything being dirty, like yeah, there's a lot of control and intentionality with everything being shitty and run down to represent the way New York is in this period of history.
Mhm. It's funny because like I feel like the reason why they make movies that take place in the 70s look like this is because this was the way movies that were filmed in the 70s looked. And
Hmm.
it's that's a really fascinating thing, that like we're trying to capture the feeling of the era, and we do it by emulating not necessarily what things looked like back then, but the way we shot things to look like back then, which is really fascinating to me.
Yeah, that's not having been alive in the 70s, I can't really say, right?
Yeah.
But I get what you're saying, that like anybody trying to depict New York in the 70s has definitely watched Taxi Driver,
Mm-hmm.
and is sort of using that as a visual reference in some regards.
Yeah, I mean, just the filmmaking style that was most prevalent in the 70s was this very like naturalistic, realistic. Like we did natural looking lighting. We did like shot on location. We did, you know, muted color palettes and all these things. Like the grime and the dirt and the realism of the world was a thing that was focused on a lot in that era. And so when we shoot stuff that takes place there, that's, I mean, at least we can say, I don't want to be too broad, but at least we can say that's what Ridley Scott does for sure. Because yeah, this movie very much, I could believe, except for the actors in it, that it was shot in the 70s.
Yeah. Did you want to talk about how this movie cost $100 million to make somehow?
It did. It did cost $100 million to make. And do you want to know why it cost $100 million to make? Because there were 180 separate locations in this movie.
Uh-huh.
Which, I mean, when you hear that number, it sounds ridiculous. But then when you start going through the movie, you're like, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, right.
And I think Ridley Scott says this was one of his most challenging films to make, which is a hilarious thing to say from the director that made Gladiator and Kingdom of Heaven, these massive epic action war movies, and yet this was one of the more challenging films for him to make, one of the biggest films he ever made.
Yeah,
it's crazy, but it works. I mean, the scenes that take place in Thailand and Vietnam, he flew to Thailand. They shot it in Bangkok. Like, probably didn't have to do that, right? You probably could have like gone somewhere a little bit closer to home and made it look like you were in Bangkok. But no. They went on location and they shot it over there.
Yeah, I mean, you're totally right. Like, there's all these moments where you're like in some club or something for like a scene that lasts 5 minutes, or like some penthouse apartment for 5 minutes, and yeah, we keep moving. It makes sense, right? It makes sense that would be hard, because like even if you're going to do a giant epic battle or whatever, then it's like, okay, well, this epic battle scene is going to last half an hour or whatever, so we're not going to have to move everything and reset up everything. We're just kind of going. But when you're moving between locations, you got to redo the lighting, you got to redo the costuming, you got to check all the details.
It's a pain. Shooting on location sucks.
Yeah.
Here's a little tip for anyone. If a filmmaker ever asks if they can shoot on location in like your place of business or your house or something, say no. Don't do it.
Is it like that Simpsons joke where they're like the Simpsons let the Radioactive Man crew film in their house, and they immediately smash a hole through Bart's wall to run a wire?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
I mean, probably not to that level, but like, it will always take longer than they tell you it will. They will always be more invasive and less and care less about your stuff than they tell you they will. Like, it's just always like my sister works in a library up in New York, and they filmed some scenes for, it's a very, very old library. So I forget what they filmed. It doesn't matter. A period piece or something. And they were there like so much longer than they said they were going to be. And like when they originally agreed to let them come, they were saying, okay, but like after business hours. And they just showed up at 8 a.m. And they were like, well, we're going to film now.
Oh my God. Never
let people film at your place. I think filming on location is great. I think it adds a lot of realism to your movies. I mean, I think it's funny. There's an interview that just came out today where Christian Bale is like bitching about how terrible it was to film that Marvel movie, where he was just in a room with blue screen like 12 hours a day for 3 weeks or something, and how he just like lost all sense of time or what scene he was in or any of that stuff. So like filming on location, better, much better. But if you are the location, say no or get a lot of money.
I'm reminded of 20 years ago when Ian McKellen, like, having an emotional breakdown because he was just talking to a tennis ball while, and it's like, okay, well, here we are 20 years later and we've just made that even worse. So, yeah.
Talking to a tennis ball in a room surrounded by the brightest blue.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, that sounds like hell. Okay. Anything else you want to say about American Gangster?
No, not really. Beyond just liked a lot more than I thought. I keep having this tug of war in my soul where I'm like, God, Ridley, I want to see you make an hour and a half movie. I just want to see you do it. But then I just keep enjoying his 2.5 hour movies, even if it takes me all goddamn day to watch them.
Yeah.
Like I really like I have a lot of obligations, Ridley. I have to. I'm sorry. I have to pause your movies many, many, many times to get through them with the way my life is. Um, it often takes me multiple days to finish these movies just because of the restrictions. I still enjoy them though, so that's something.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Guess how long his next movie is? Just guess.
2.5 hours. But what movie is it?
It's a Body of Lies. Is the
Body
next
of
one.
Lies, 2.5 hours.
No, it's only 2 hours and 8 minutes.
Okay.
So. Which is like, I think like this movie is actually long for a Ridley movie. I think the Ridley sweet spot is 2 hours and 6 to 2 hours and 10 minutes. I think they're most of them are in that range.
You're right. We did notice this pattern at one point. Yeah, totally.
But I guess we should say that American Gangster was pretty successful. As we said, it was $100 million budget, which is pretty big for a movie like that. Like this movie cost $30 million less than Kingdom of Heaven.
Jesus.
Just wild. But it brought in more money than Kingdom of Heaven. $269 million this movie brought in. So definitely financially successful. So once again, Ridley Scott is given a giant budget and is successful despite many, many failures in the past.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Good for him.
I think part of that has to be the Denzel factor, right? Like Denzel is such a huge draw at the movies. People really, really like him.
Denzel's a huge draw. And as we talked about a little bit last time, Russell Crowe was kind of in the limelight during this period of time.
Yeah, that's definitely true. All right. So yeah, the next film on our list is Body of Lies. Another Russell Crowe film, 3 in a row now. Russell Crowe and Ridley, and not even the last one.
Yeah.
So we still have Robin Hood coming up.
It's good. It's making me happy. I liked him in this movie.
We didn't actually talk about Russell Crowe in this movie very much. I liked him a lot. I liked him a whole lot. It's a very different character than the character he played in the last movie. It's a very different character from Maximus. He's kind of playing he's a good guy, but he's kind of a schlubby guy too, which again is why it's so funny that all these women want to like immediately fuck him. It's really funny, but I think he's really good. I guess I don't know. We were talking about this before. It's a little weird that like the Richie Roberts in real life is a Jewish man, and Russell Crowe is definitely not Jewish.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know what Hollywood felt like about these things at that point in time. But
I mean, I think normally I wouldn't care, but the movie makes a point of pointing out that he's Jewish when the man calls him a Jewish slur. Like, and I was talking about this with you. I know why they left that scene in, because I think that's really important to some of the theming they're doing, that this guy, as the second he doesn't get his way, immediately drops a racial slur because we just reduced to racial bullshit immediately,
right. or revealing that was what was underlying all of this bullshit the whole time. Yeah. I totally get why, but yeah, it's just like I can't think of a person that is less Jewish than Russell Crowe. I mean, honestly, yeah, it's confusing because watching the movie, unless you happen to notice that he's wearing a tiny little Star of David necklace, you would just have no idea where that came from, right? Because you're just like, what did he call him? I think Russ. I keep calling him. Yeah, I'm gonna keep doing that. I think he was really good. It's sort of again, it's like a Boy Scout role. So but at the same time, he manages to be a little bit seedy and sleazy. I think my favorite moment was when he has the last time he's in court with his wife, his ex-wife, I guess, and they. And his wife just tears into him verbally, and you see him kind of like absorb this, and then he tells her like, you're right, I shouldn't be around, and you see him. It's the classic Russell Crowe thing where it's a combination of like stoic, but also like 8,000 micro expressions are passing over his face, so you can see that he's totally torn up and like about to cry, but also no, of course he's not going to cry because he's Russell Crowe. Just a great performance there.
It really is a good performance. I really love that line too. You're honest about your work so you can be dishonest about everything else. And it's it's a great line.
Which I think that also connects to the thing we talked about at the very beginning, where him and Denzel are actually more similar than it would appear, because they both. Russell Crowe's character is not perfect. In fact, he is not as perfect as maybe we would think. So
yeah. Definitely. All right. So that is American Gangster, a very, very good movie that everyone should watch. Another one of those that I did not know was directed by Ridley Scott.
Yeah, I don't even remember if I knew that or not.
Doof. All right, Matt, before we go for the week, we got a couple quick items to do. First, we need to talk about our episode on Parasite last week and what our community decided to do as far as voting it into the canon or not. What is your prediction here, Matt? Yes or no on Parasite?
I'm going to predict yes. I didn't look at the results.
You are correct. The answer was yes. And once again, for the second week in a row and the second time ever, with 100% of the vote.
Wow.
Parasite is now into the Doof canon. I will indeed get that full list for us by this time next month. I promise. Promise it's going to happen. But Parasite will be on it.
People really like that movie.
People really do. Yeah.
And I get it. It's I don't know. It's almost gratifying to see everyone recognize that something is great when it is indeed great.
Worth talking about is we got a comment from someone who linked an article that both of us have read, which is an article by someone who is arguing that actually the rich people in Parasite did nothing wrong, and it's the poor people that are the bad ones.
Yeah.
Which is obviously not an article that I don't think you and I agree with on the surface, but I actually kind of respect that take a little bit more than some of the other ones, because at least it's trying to examine the ways in which the other characters are actually shitty people.
Yeah. So just for, context, like that article came out in a period of time where like every single take was like, obviously the poor people did nothing wrong and the rich people deserved everything they got. And then like one person dares to be like, honestly, they were being provocative because they were like, actually, it's the opposite of that.
Yeah, I feel like it was specifically designed to be I'm not sure how much the author of that piece actually fully buys into the take he wrote about, but
I think you're right that it was designed to be provocative. But in the time that it came out, it was actually pretty funny because you're like, this person is at least honestly reporting on certain things that happened in the movie that don't fit into the narrative of the poor, the poor family did nothing wrong at all.
Yep.
So,
yep.
Yeah.
But regardless, whether or not you think the poor family did anything right or wrong, they did one thing right, and that's get into the Doof canon. Okay, Matt. Let's talk about Mario. So the first trailer for the new Super Mario Brothers animated movie came out today, as we record this, just a few hours ago, and the internet has takes. And I thought I'd ask for your take. What did you think of this trailer?
I think it's probably going to be really fun. I think my kids are probably going to enjoy it a lot. My son, who's really, into Mario, he's beaten Mario Odyssey countless times. He's excited, and that's all I got to say about that.
Isn't it weird that this is one of those things that like the take mill seems like ready to pounce on? A Super Mario movie.
Yeah, there's a weird ecosystem of takes where some people have decided that like it's bizarre and inexplicable that they would select Chris Pratt for this, and it's like Chris Pratt was the main voice of the Lego movie.
He's been the main voice in several animated films.
Right.
Like he's pretty good at this, actually.
I only single out the Lego movie because everyone loves the Lego movie.
Yeah.
And Chris Pratt did a great job. So it's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
It's bad on purpose to make you click, basically, is my sense of these things.
Yeah, I just like the big thing was like, what is he going to do with the Mario voice? And it seems like what he's going to do with the Mario voice is he's mostly just going to be Chris Pratt, but also he's going to put a little New York accent on it, which is fine. Here's the thing that I think we need to remember here. This is a movie made for children. Like more so like Illumination specifically, which is the studio making this movie, is a studio that makes movies for children. And I don't mean like in the Pixar sense where they're for kids, but also they're for adults. The Minions movies are for children. Like that's who they're for.
Yeah.
This is a movie made for children, and I really think children are going to get a fucking kick out of it. Just based on this one trailer alone, I think kids are going to end up really liking this thing. And I don't give a shit about what Mario sounds like. Like, imagine caring what Super Mario sounds like in a cartoon movie for kids. I don't care.
It's a character who they only grudgingly give a voice in the video game at all anyway.
Yeah.
It's stupid, man.
He
dumb.
says, "It's a me, a Mario."
Yeah.
And that's it. That's all he says.
Sometimes he says "Wahoo," which is not a word. So yeah. It's I'm gonna you know what? I'm pretty sure I'm gonna enjoy it too, because I like watching these Illumination movies with my kids. I don't you're right that they're not like, oh, but the deep thematic resonance of Minions Rise of Gru. but I am like, oh, this is fun. I'm having a good time.
Sure.
Fun and interesting things are happening on the screen, and I'm smiling and I'm laughing occasionally.
Yeah.
It's fine. Chill out.
Yeah, I don't get it. My favorite thing was though that the meme that said Joe Biden heard the Mario voice once and then legalized weed.
Yeah. That
was pretty good. I enjoyed that meme because it's poking fun at the ridiculousness of this whole thing. But
right. It's something that will only be funny like today. But yeah,
I think this is especially important coming from us, and specifically you as the proclaimed biggest fan of the Super Mario Brothers movie that came out in the 90s, like the world's biggest fan of that movie.
I mean we may be the two biggest remaining fans of the Mario movie. Yeah.
I don't know if I'm even close to as much of a fan of this movie. I think on that episode I specifically was like, this movie's bad.
No, you're yeah, it's fair. I mean, I still love it.
I know you do. I don't dislike it, but
this is just gonna, this isn't this isn't doing what that movie is doing at all.
No, it's a cute little kids movie where Jack Black plays Bowser. That sounds great to me.
Yeah.
The trailer had a little penguin throw a snowball at Bowser, and then ask him to surrender. That's delightful. I'm delighted.
Yeah, me too.
It's gonna start a whole Mario cinematic universe.
The MCU.
You're right. It can't be that. It has to be the Super Mario Cinematic Universe. So the SMCU.
I did enjoy that everyone was like excited about Luigi. Which when we were kids, nobody was ever excited about Luigi. But
yeah, I think Luigi's come around to being the most popular one because it's like become a thing that Luigi shit on, and so now we are like over the top excited about Luigi.
He's the underdog. Well, and also the Luigi's Haunted Mansion games actually rock pretty hard. So that could also be part of it.
We should get a Luigi's Mansion movie.
We should get a Luigi's Mansion movie. I think
movie. Charlie Day is doing the voice of Luigi in this movie, which is great. And he should do a Charlie Day Luigi's Mansion movie.
And it should be really scary.
Yeah, like in the Ghostbusters kind of way, where it's also really funny.
Like funny and fun, but also scary. Yeah.
And a giant sex metaphor.
And maybe some highly sexually charged scenes, like Ghostbusters. Yeah.
Maybe they should just make Luigi's Ghostbusters.
This is a really good idea.
I mean, that's kind of what Luigi's Mansion already is.
You're right.
He has a proton pack on his back. It's just a vacuum cleaner.
He exactly does have a proton pack and like all of the things. You're totally right. It is Ghostbusters, and he's in a hotel, which is the major set piece of that movie. So, totally.
We've done it. Let's sell it.
Yeah.
Illumination.
Yeah.
I am interested to see how this movie does, though. I am. I think it's going to do well, but I guess is your son like do most kids really love Mario? I don't know. I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, I don't know. Mario Odyssey was pretty popular, but that was a few years ago, that it came out. And he doesn't really play Mario much anymore. I will say after he saw the trailer, he watched a bunch of like Mario YouTubes. So clearly kind of got his Mario juices flowing. So
I'm curious. This is the last thing I'll say on it, though. I'm curious, like, we were talking about all these dumb takes on this movie, and we were talking about like, what is it with our generation and caring about these kind of things? And so I did an experiment to see if it's our generation that cares about these kind of things, or it's just perpetually online people. And so I texted a bunch of my friends asking them for their take on Chris Pratt's voice in the Mario movie trailer. None of them responded to me. and it's not as if like they weren't they didn't read them. I literally think my friend David looked at this text message and was like, what the fuck is he talking? I'm not going to respond to this. I have children to take care of.
Yeah, I have a life, and yeah.
So I think the majority of people don't give a shit about this at all.
And good for them.
Yes, exactly. The only reason we give a shit about it is because we have a podcast, I guess.
Yes. Yeah.
We shouldn't give a shit. I'm done talking about Mario.
I agree. It's going to be great.
It's going to be great. All right. I think that's going to do it for us this week. If you have any opinions on American Gangster or on Chris Pratt's Mario voice, maybe don't reach out about that last one.
Yeah,
but you can find us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com or over on our Twitter account at doofmedia. You can also find us on Reddit. That's r/doofmedia, where there will be a thread for this very episode where you can post your opinions. Matt, we actually did get an email from a listener that showed us an article that shows that actually certain vines are illegal in France, which ties back to our A Good Year episode.
Incredible.
So France does make certain vines illegal, which is kind of crazy.
Well, I mean, I'm slightly less baffled by the movie now, but
sure,
not entirely less baffled because
Fair.
But anyway, if you're not already subscribed to the Doofcast, we encourage you to do so and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found.
And if you're not already I'm just reading the part you just said. That's how tired I am.
Yep.
If you like what we do here and want to support us, consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. You can head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia and pledge to us at any of the available levels. We had a bonus podcast come out this week where Matt and his brother, what'd you talk about this month, Matt?
As fairly usual, we talked about AI, and we talked about how technologies are getting better and better, faster and faster. And it makes it really hard to know when to buy a computer because they're just going to keep getting better. And then you're going to always feel like you bought a piece of shit that's already obsolete pretty much forever from now on.
Buy it now.
To buy it now, I guess. Yeah.
Now.
Yeah, like right now.
Now.
Yeah.
Now.
Anyway.
Now.
Also, please consider rating and reviewing the Doofcast on Apple Podcasts. Every review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
Buy it now.
But it's too late now. It's too late.
Shit. All right, folks. We'll see you here right back next week where we are covering the 18th Ridley Scott film. It's more Russell Crowe. We're talking about 2008's Body of Lies. I don't know if I've ever seen this movie. Surely I did. It's Leo DiCaprio and Russell Crowe. Surely I saw it.
I definitely have. I like it, I think. I'm not sure.
We'll find out next week.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.